Welcome to the Brother Henry and You Show. I am your host, Henry Harris. Henry and You Show. I am your host, Henry Harris. What an honor it is to have you to tune in with us today. We have such an amazing program for you today. Today, my special guest is Sherrie Campbell, and it's such an honor to have her on our show today. Sherrie is a licensed psychologist, counselor, and marriage and family therapist, and with over 2 decades of experience and training, she has brought much hope and healing to the world. And for that, I applaud you and thank you for your many years of dedication and service and bringing light into the lives of so many people.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you for having me on your show.
Thank you. It's an honor to have you. When you think about the word stuck, you think about, and what comes to my mind is that you can't move. I feel like in the context of what we're going to talk about today, we're going to talk about abuse. And I just don't want this to be an interview. I want it to be a conversation as well. And it's mainly directed, as I told Sherrie before this broadcast started, towards women. Because in my opinion, it appears that women seem to be the ones that actually go through this the most, based on conversations I've had and things I've seen personally. So many women today are what we would call stuck in an abusive marriage, stuck in an abusive relationship. How do I get out? I don't know how to get out. We're going to talk about all that today, but Sherrie, I feel like it's important that we first of all discuss the different types of abuse. Would you mind going over just a few of them and letting us know what is abuse? And then after that, I'll ask you the next question.
All righty. So there are many types of abuse. Obviously, there's emotional abuse, verbal abuse. Those tend to go together, where you're being verbally abused. It hijacks you emotionally. Your mind feels very twisted. You're not able to think rationally, and that keeps you stuck. Because it keeps you believing you're abuser, because they twist you against your own mind, so you don't trust yourself. There's physical abuse, which you could be scared into submission through physical intimidation. So you get too afraid to go anywhere for the fear that either you will be murdered, you will be beaten, or your children will be hurt, beaten, or murdered, right? Or this partner could be threatening suicide every time that you're trying to exit the relationship, and that's still a level of physical abuse, along with obviously emotional manipulation. There's financial abuse. A lot of people don't talk about that one, but a lot of women in particular stay stuck because maybe they haven't worked. Perhaps they don't have the income to take care of themselves or to get out, so they feel stuck to this man. And these types of men typically don't want their women working, so they can keep them stuck. And there are plenty of women that work, though, and they're still financially abused. Perhaps he runs all the money. Perhaps he controls the one account that you have, so you don't have access to it. There are abusers that will do that. And, I think that when you're either physically abused, you're mentally abused, emotionally abused, physically abused, what happens is you're spiritually abused.
Yeah.
You're losing contact with your spirit. You're being separated from it. And you don't feel like you've got that strength, and there feels like there's no hope. So it becomes easier to stay because you can't figure out how to leave without there being massive consequences on any level of those abuses.
I like those. What would you say is the most damaging? I mean, they're all damaging, but what would you say is the top notch one that's like the worst?
The worst, I forgot sexual. There is sexual abuse, and sometimes that falls under physical abuse for people. I believe it's slightly different simply because you're really now going after the soul of somebody, sex being such an intimate act. So if you're being forced there on some level, either coerced physically or you're being guilted into it, that's a whole nother level of losing yourself into the abuse. So the worst part of any abuse is the emotional manipulation, believe it or not, what you can't see that goes behind it.
Hmm.
It's because abusers hijack you from your own ability to think rationally and clearly. So that's why I think it's the most powerful. The sociopath, the narcissist, the psychopath, they all manipulate your mind. If they can't manipulate your mind, then really no abuse will work. But because they can manipulate your mind and they start guilting you and making you feel like somehow you're the bad guy, they're just
Yeah.
responding to how bad you are. You get stuck and you get tricked. And that's what causes these women to be really like confused more than anything. And then that confusion leads to fear. Because if you can't count on yourself to find your way through something, you really are homeless to your own decision making.
Why is it important for women to become familiarized with these different types of abuse? Do you think it's possible for women to be in abusive relationships and maybe they are not aware of it?
Yes, I think that many women would like to hope a lot that their partner will be what they want. So they try to think them into being different, pray them into being different, hope them into being different, talk them into being different. And so they might see, and this is the trick, manipulation works because they give their victims doses of intermittent kindness. So when you get a dollop of kindness, it reinvokes your hope that there's some good in this person if you could just get it out.
Or
So
they will change?
or they will change. And so some of these women, or even men that are in this situation, because I do see that as well, although I know today's
Yeah.
geared toward women, but they get a little glimmer of hope and it's all it takes. It's basically Stockholm syndrome. You start to become empathetic towards your captor and maybe their story of why they are the way they are. That has a bandwidth, however, and that will wear out over time. It's just that it could be decades,
Wow.
right? That's the sad part.
That is a sad part. What would you say is the overall reason why some won't leave an abusive relationship? Like they're stuck, but they just won't leave.
Some of them, depending on age, depending on finances, depending on even maybe family or certain other connections to friends and a social group. Because when you leave an abuser, they will do a smear campaign. So you lose everything. You're going to
Yeah.
lose friends. You're going to lose maybe even some of your family members. They have no problem going after even your own family and smearing you to them. They're brilliant liars. So a lot of women, I think, resign themselves to it, especially the older they are. It's like, well, this is all I know. And I've been with him for this long and I've got kids. Some people stay for the kids, believe it or not, which is kind of sad because those kids end up learning abuse rather than learning love.
Hmm.
It'd be better for those kids to have those parents separate and learn at least love somewhere, right? But I think that it seems so hopeless to some women that they just resign to their fate.
I mentioned leave, and I talked to several women who are currently in this situation. Um, I had one of my friend ladies that went through this for several years, and thank God she's not with him no more, and she's out of that situation. And me and her had a conversation. I'm the type of person where if it's something I don't know or not aware of, I want to talk to somebody who has been there. And I was doing a show on, actually, I did do it. It's called Why One Cannot Just Leave an Abusive Marriage. And that show exploded. Everybody loved it. But my mindset at first was, before I talked to her, a woman who has experienced it, my mindset at first was, oh, it's easy to tell that person to just leave. But now, after speaking with someone who's actually went through it, we find out that that's not always the case. So, is it that easy to just leave?
No, it can feel like you're climbing Mount Everest because see, you've lost yourself. What are you going to leave for? Right? There's no certainty. There could be no finances. There's no support group. Your friends are connected to this abuser. It's so easy to say, well, just leave. But there are so many consequences to leaving because you have been hijacked away from yourself. You're going to leave and have no sense of self. You don't even have you to turn to. People don't understand the gravity of what that feels like. Because when you go out alone, yes, that would give you the opportunity to find yourself. But what if you don't have the income to see a therapist?
Mm-hmm.
So what if you don't have that kind? I've treated many people over the course of my 30 years in business that some have the income to do that and some don't. And even the ones that have income, the idea of leaving and not being controlled by somebody, what they don't understand is they've been habituated to having someone else control them. So it's like the prisoner who leaves prison. He's been in there for 30 years. He gets out in this world and the cars are ripping by him. And it's like this world he's not used to or she's not used to. So she commits a crime and goes back in. Because you get habituated over time. I went through this. I left a family environment. Okay, so I was hijacked from myself from very, very young because I had parents that were very emotionally abusive. Mm-hmm. So when at 45, okay, it took me 45 years, 5 years ago, I knew that if I was ever going to have a shot at being healthy or well, that I had to separate. Mm-hmm. But I have the means. I moved to a different state, 20 some years ago. So that separation I was able to build slowly. I don't share children with my parents, obviously. So there wasn't that snag, but it's so hard to leave because it took me the last 5 years of being in my own therapy to continue to recover myself, to continue to find myself outside of my parents' abuse of me. So I can't imagine when you've had children with someone or you've fallen in romantic love, which is a different kind of love, and you're tied up in this person and they're abusing you. And then they're like running that cycle of violence, right? Mm-hmm. Abuse. And then it's 2-3 weeks of like, so sorry, buying you gifts, promising you everything that you've ever wanted to hear. They finally have you, and then they start abusing you again. So it's tricky because abuse is dosed up with hope. Mm-hmm. So it's not easy to leave.
Yeah, it's not easy at all. What if they did leave that stuck situation or the abusive situation and go back?
Many
now,
do.
I'm be honest with you. I don't understand that. It's like I've been in this pattern, or may I say cycle of abuse, and I've been in a situation that I've been per se complaining about. I need to get out of here. And finally you're out. And then all of a sudden, it's like going out fishing. They get reeled back in. It's like you talked about manipulation earlier. I know that has a whole lot to do with it. But maybe you can explain to our audience, why is that? And then I'm going to ask a couple more questions.
You bet. Okay, so there's a term called hoovering, Hoovering. And I would have your audience Google that, but let me explain what that is. The Hoover vacuum, okay? It sucks you in. So what a narcissist or a psychopath or an abuser of any diagnosis does after a breakup, if you have allowed any line of contact to them, they will at first ignore you, and then they'll start hitting you up like, hey, I think my bag is at your house, or happy birthday, or how are you, just checking in. Okay, well, you're not well yet. You're not on your feet. We tend to want the person who abuses us to cure us. So we look to the person who caused our trauma to fix it.
Wow, I never looked at it that way.
Because they are the one that hurt us, so we feel they are the only one that can repair. So if they could just come back and say they're sorry and own their stuff, own their abuse, then we'd be well. But what they do instead is they hoover you, and they start dosing you up with little treats of what kind of feels like validation, but they're not giving you closure. They're just giving you validation so they can suck you back in and repeat the whole cycle over again. And then by the time you get sucked back in, you've believed that they've changed, that this time it's different. They're doing and saying things they've never done before. Well, they know how to do all this. So let me tell the audience that every time you go back, it's more painful when you get out. Every time you are going to leave from a lower and lower space in yourself.
And will they even take the abuser? Will he or she, as you say, will they even take that person seriously? Like they left, but they just keep coming back, left again. Will the abuser finally say, okay, this person is serious, they're not coming back? Will the abuser ever take that seriously?
Yes, it depends on what the victim does. So you have to go no contact. You need to block your phone, block your social media. Don't give your new address out. You need to shut it down all the way. So there's no access. Now, these people seem to be crafty enough oftentimes to find some level. They might know where you work or whatnot. But to the very best of your ability, you need to go dark. And what happens is that's their kryptonite. Silence is their kryptonite. So that's your superpower. So if, let's say they show up at your work. Let's just say they do that, right? They know you're there. They know how to get a hold of you or whatever. You have to, well, I would be weaponed. I would have mace or whatever if you think they could be violent. If they're not, just ignore. They could follow you to your car, just ignore them, or turn around and say, if you ever come here again, I'm going to call the police. I'm not interested in any of this conversation. I mean, they will even hoover your family members when you cut ties. Like, I can't get a hold of her and I need this. It's all fake. So then you have to set your support group up to no contact. Don't believe a thing he says. Block his number or block her number, whichever way it goes, right? So just to the very best of your ability, you cannot engage. If you engage at all, you make yourself very vulnerable.
That's real good. And my last question is, that woman right now that's watching that's stuck, what's your message to her?
Hugs. There's a way out. Read. Like if you're in a space where you can't get help without either that person noticing, or you just feel like you can't get out, just start reading. Educate yourself on yourself. Find yourself again. Read Codependent No More. Read about toxic people.
And you got some amazing books yourself.
Yes, I write on toxic family. I do have a little daily devotional that's dropping in April. It's in Kindle now, but it's your pocket therapist. And it's a daily devotional. It's little doses of how to deal with these types of people. You can get that on Kindle right now. But I just, reading saved my life. I was too young. I believe in The Art of War. That's a phenomenal book. You have to study your enemy to know what you're dealing with, right? You see, when you study the person that's hurting you, and you start to understand that what the objective is of their abuse, you're not hijacked as easily. And people don't do that. They don't study their abuser. They just want to change that person. They're not going to change. There's something wrong. So study them so that you understand them. Knowledge is power. Power helps you go.
Dr. Sherrie Campbell, thank you so much for taking this opportunity to be on the show. What a wonderful interview, wonderful conversation. I learned a lot myself just listening. to you. For more information about Dr. Sherrie, you can visit drsherriecampbell.com. Is that the right address?
Yes, that's the right address. And they can find me on Facebook. You know, you follow me, and
Yes, I do.
there's a lot of information on there. And I loved the interview. You were so fun, Henry. And I love your accent.
Well,
I
I'm
don't know where
already,
you're from, but you're down south, and I love it. It's very sweet.
I live in Missouri now, me and my daughter, but I'm originally from Texas. So,
Got it.
so yeah, everybody I interviewed said they like my accent. So,
I love it. It's so charming, and it's just fun. And I think you're great. And I appreciate what you do in the world. And I really am happy to have been on your show. So thank you so much.
We hope you have enjoyed today's program. We want to connect with you. Visit us at facebook.com/The Brother Henry and You Show, or visit us on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Henry Harris 100. We're so grateful you tuned in today and hope you have a fantastic day.